experiences.
Consciousness separates from the body and goes over the body.
And past life memories research
There is some entity that carries on.
are shedding new light on the way we look at life. Science today is witnessing a paradigm shift.
The paradigm shift is going to affect us in a major way.
New alternative explanations are emerging.
Science is really good at experiments and theory development, and marry that with the mystical experience, we'll develop a whole new civilization.
Could it be that now, finally, we are closer to understanding the timeless mysteries? I am. I exist.
Consciousness may need to go outside the box in order to be able to perceive it in its wholeness.
The source of consciousness is all that is, which is the source of everything that exists in the universe.
Consciousness is the ground of all being.
Death is a huge taboo in our Western world. Death doesn't exist in the Western world. In medical study, we don't talk about death, and the death of the body is still taboo because most people, and especially most scientists, believe that the death of the body is the end of who you are, is the end of your consciousness.
This complexity of the mystery of death in the Western civilization is very definingly recorded by the 17th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer in his book Parega and Paralipomena II. He writes, "Were an Asiatic to ask me for a definition of Europe, I should be forced to answer him, it is that part of the world which is haunted by the incredible delusion that man was created out of nothing, and that his present birth is his first entrance into life. Reincarnation, the idea that we return in another body after the death of our current body, has fascinated people throughout history. Wisdom traditions all over the globe have considered reincarnation as an integral tenet of their worldviews. Even pharaonic Egypt, polytheistic Greece and Rome, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, almost all ethnic shamanism, and tribal beliefs across the globe accepted reincarnation. Considering the overwhelming global acceptance of reincarnation, it is no wonder that Schopenhauer considered the European disbelief in reincarnation an incredible delusion. The global expansion of European colonialism led to disbelief in reincarnation in the West and in the westernized parts of the East. Still, even today, 1/3 of the world population believes in reincarnation. According to a survey conducted by the Pew Research Forum, nearly 24% of Americans believe in reincarnation. Similar statistics have been found for European countries. Perhaps times seem to be changing since Schopenhauer's wry observation. What may have caused this change? The recent findings in the fields of neuroscience.
The mainstream view in neuroscience, in contemporary neuroscience, is that what we call mind and consciousness are simply the product of electrical and chemical activity in the brain. So that's the central dogma. But there's a growing number of scientists arguing against this view based on a variety of empirical evidence.
Consciousness studies.
Science is an evolving system, so our definition of material is changing and has changed. Our definition of living systems is changing as well. So at some point, the difference that we currently see between spiritual ideas, mystical ideas, and the physicalism that science is so good at, that will probably change. And so the interesting question is, will they begin to converge or diverge?
Near-death experiences.
All of us people investigating near-death experiences see the same pattern of elements. Often one of the first things to happen right after that life-threatening event, often the first element of a near-death experience, is what's called an out-of-body experience. Consciousness separates from the body and goes over the body. From that vantage point, they can see ongoing earthly events, which may include their own frantic resuscitation efforts.
Past life memories research.
These cases, Ian called them cases of the reincarnation type. They do provide evidence that something has survived after somebody dies, that memories and emotions have survived.
And quantum physics.
Quantum physics finds that the answer to all of this riddle is really this idea that consciousness is the ground of all being, and matter exists as possibilities of this consciousness to choose from.
Have all collectively forced our current science to reconsider many of the earlier held notions of mind, brain, body, and consciousness.
It's a challenge for science to discuss consciousness, because our current science is reductionist and materialist, which means that you have to measure, to objectify, and to reproduce. We cannot do it with consciousness. You cannot prove consciousness. You cannot reproduce consciousness. You cannot objectify it. What we can measure in the brain with neuroimaging techniques is activities. We can measure changing activities in the brain, chemical activities, electrical activities, changes in blood flow, the fMRI, the PET scanners, chemical activities. But we cannot measure the content of our feelings and thoughts. We cannot measure the content of consciousness.
The phenomenon of consciousness eludes precise scientific definition. Traditional theories propose that the brain produces consciousness.
For decades, indeed, we have believed that consciousness is a brain phenomenon.
But before exploring the technicalities of this complex subject, it's important to reconsider our intuitive understanding. Or the entire nervous system that sees and hears then. But a body without life has a brain and nervous system too, yet it does not see or hear. Why?
Whole model of scientific materialism is reductionism. Little objects like elementary particles make up atoms, make up molecules, make up neurons, make up the brain, and then brain makes consciousness. This is the idea. But look, objects can only make objects. Objects will never make subject. Object will never give you this phenomenon of the self that we experience. I, the experiencer. And you cannot say that you don't experience. You do experience. How do you experience? Or do you experience yourself as an object? No, it doesn't make any sense. You experience because you feel that you are separate from the objects that you experience.
When we think and talk about our bodily parts, we say, my hand, my legs, and so on, not I hand or I legs. We think and talk of our body as my body, not I body, thus indicating that I am not my whole body either. This difference between me on one hand and my body and its parts on the other hand is not just a matter of quibbling with words, but is also a matter of practical experience. We feel ourselves as the possessor of our body and its parts. Could the answer be that something or someone distinct from the body does the perceiving? The question then still remains, who is the I that claims owner's rights over the body and its parts?
From a metaphysical perspective, perhaps there's some independent entity that comes into the body and then gives it awareness or life.
When a loved one dies, the everyday language of their relatives resonates with this traditional wisdom, even if they themselves aren't aware of this resonance. They say, he has passed away. But who or what has passed away? The person that they think they loved is still lying there. The body has not gone anywhere. Yet they feel an acute sense of bereavement. Their feelings of loss affirm their words. The actual person they loved has indeed passed away. So the question still remains, who has passed away? Could it be something different from the body, whose presence made the body appear alive, and whose departure made the body dead? Who is that unchanging person? If we evaluate the chemicals that comprise the body, they cost a few dollars. Yet we all know that we're something more, much more. Who is that I?
People used to measure a person's weight just before the person died and just after the person died, and they never found any difference in weight.
Just before and after the moment of death, the chemical composition of the body remains the same. Yet something essential has changed. Life has left the body. If the chemicals that comprise our body don't tally with our sense of identity and personality, or our sense of self-worth, or our sense of the transition at death, then could we be missing the point by identifying ourselves as the bag of chemicals that is our body?
Problem.
Why does science not have an answer to this basic, fundamental question? The materialist theory proposes that the brain produces consciousness. But there are three main problems with this theory. First, how can unconscious brain cells produce consciousness? Second, how can our memories stay intact despite the constant change of brain cells? Third, how can consciousness change the brain's structure? Let's consider the first question. How can unconscious brain cells produce consciousness? This problem has perplexed arose.
As you watch these light rays striking the magnified eye, similar tiny beams of light are entering your own eyes.
When we see a rose, light rays of various frequencies enter the retina of our eye. The eye cells react to the amount of light entering and then generate electrochemical impulses that pass through the optic nerve to the visual areas of the brain. This activates certain nerve cells and their connections with other cells. What then? How does the image of a rose emerge in our consciousness? Where is that image formed in the brain? Nobel laureate Francis Crick admits, so far we can locate no single region in which the neural activity corresponds exactly to the vivid picture of the world we see in front of our eyes. Is it possible that our memories are stored not just in the brain, but also in some non-material storehouse from where they're made available to the newly formed brain cells? Does this imply that our consciousness has its origin somewhere beyond the brain? Of course, it is true that damage to the brain usually impairs the corresponding bodily functions. Damage to the speech center of the brain, for example, often results in an inability to speak. The brain and consciousness are intimately connected, but neuroscientists have trouble specifying the nature of that connection. The renowned psychologist William James claimed that the correspondence between brain damage and bodily function could also be explained if the brain were merely transmitting and not producing consciousness. He illustrated this with the example of the way a prism transmits light. When a prism is damaged, the light passed through it may get distorted. Similarly, when the brain gets damaged, the consciousness passed through it may get impeded.
If you modify, for instance, a component, an electronic component within your TV set, of course you will alter the reception of the information, for instance, the images, the sound, and so on and so forth, but that does not affect at all the program itself or the TV station that is sending the electromagnetic waves to the air, you see? So it's a bit the same kind of analogy that we can use with regard to the relationship between what we call mind and brain.
I would say that so far, every experience that people have is correlated with brain activity. That doesn't mean that the brain is causing it. It may be that the brain is reflecting what's going on. So the causal direction on experience we don't understand very well.
This idea of an extracerebral source of consciousness gains support from another astonishing finding: the ability of some people to do normal conscious activities despite having little or no brain. In the 1980s, British neurologist Dr. John Lorber published his groundbreaking study relating to hydranencephaly, where the subjects experienced normal consciousness while having little or no brain matter.
Very interesting examples of hydranencephaly, where the cerebral hemispheres, the cortex, is not there, it's absent. And the hemispheres are replaced by sacs filled with what we call cerebrospinal fluid. And in such cases, according to mainstream neuroscience, the people suffering from this form of disorder should not be intelligent at all, should not be able to function cognitively. Yet there's a neurologist called John Lorber at the University of Sheffield in the UK. During the 70s and the 80s, he scanned hundreds of those patients, and many of those patients were intellectually very strong. In one of the cases, one of the patients had an IQ of 126. He received a PhD in mathematics.
A contemporary practice reinforcing Lorber's findings is the surgical procedure hemispherectomy. This rare form of surgery, where half the brain is removed, has been performed hundreds of times over the last century to treat disorders uncontrollable in any other way. Unbelievably, the surgery has no apparent effect on personality or memory. If memories are stored in the brain, how could removing half the brain leave the memories unaffected? Now the third question: how can consciousness change the brain structure? Many scientific studies have demonstrated that our mental activities cause changes in the structure of our brain. This phenomenon is called neuroplasticity. The power of positive thoughts to improve one's sense of well-being and health has long been well known, but until recently, the power of one's thoughts to change the physical structure of the brain had been entirely unknown.
There's increasing evidence showing that you can change the adult brain if you do, for instance, certain types of mental exercise. We can take the case of meditation. We now know that if you meditate for even only a few months, you will change the way the regions that are associated to attention, concentration in the brain, the way they are functioning. But you can also, if you pursue your meditation training, after a few more weeks or even months, there will be structural changes in those regions, which means that there will be an increase, for instance, in terms of the gray matter, so the neurons themselves, and the white matter, which is the the axons, the connecting the neurons between themselves. So it's now possible to transform functionally and structurally your brain after only a few months of training, and this has been shown in recent years using brain imaging tools like functional magnetic resonance imaging scanners.
Well, now that we know, and this is fairly recently known, that what you think about in your head and what you focus on will change brain structure. The morphology changes, the connections in the brain change, and they change quickly. That suggests that if you take somebody who is a very long-term disciplined meditator, their brain is probably very different. And there's some evidence of that as well, in terms of gamma frequencies and so on. There's different structure that's going on.
Materialist science holds that consciousness can have no effect on the brain as it is produced by the brain. But the phenomenon of neuroplasticity demonstrates that consciousness does indeed change the brain structure. Dr. Pim van Lommel explains the implications of this as, it would be incorrect to claim that consciousness can only be a product of brain function. How could a product be able to change its own by itself? Then Dr. Penfield deactivated that part of the brain and the arm went down. The subject, on inquiry, described, "My arm fell down. I did not bring it down." Let's consider the implications of this simple experiment. In both cases, the activation of the brain led to the raising of the arm, and its deactivation led to the lowering of the arm. But who or what caused the activation and deactivation of the brain?
Basic philosophical assumptions of what we call modern science, which has appeared about 4 centuries ago. You had also other assumptions like reductionism, which is the idea that you can reduce all sorts of complex phenomena, like, for instance, mind consciousness, to simpler phenomena. That is, the activity, for instance, of material particles in the brain and also material fields. And so these assumptions represent the basis, the foundation of modern science. But 100 years ago, there was a revolution